Here we are again, another 15 empties. Time to give them a bit of a summary, a bit of a score, and decide whether we would replace them or not. Same as last time. Glendronach, 8-year-old. This is called the Hielan. Now Glendronach could have put out a non-age statement and called it the Hielan as their entry level, but they took a pretty confident, brave step here and they put a nice big number 8 on the front of it, which I think is fantastic. And this was decent whiskey as well. Sure, it tasted a wee bit young, but it's quite well presented at 46%. This ended up being a really good whiskey that got better as the bottle went down, as so many of them do. And I think kudos to Glendronach for putting a big 8 on that bottle instead of making it a non-age statement. Well done them. This is 8 out of 10 whiskey and I would buy this again. Craigellachie, 13-year-old. Pretty decent whiskey. Maybe not a beginner's dram, but decent nonetheless, and it takes a while to get into it and quite a while to understand it. It's one of these textured whiskies thanks to its worm tub condensation. It's nice to see this out there again. It's nice to see this full range supported in their crazy age statements, 13, 17, 21, no, 23, 31. Certainly as you get older, the Craigellachies get really, really magical. This at 13-year-olds is still quite good. I would give this an 8 out of 10 and I would replace it again if I could find it at a reasonable price. Decent stuff. Tomatin, 12-year-old. Now this is the old design of Tomatin. This is always pretty good value. Any Tomatin is at a decent price level. And I don't know how long that's going to last because the liquid inside tends to be pretty bloody good as well. This was good and I would certainly replace this, especially if I got it as cheap as I got this one. I paid less than £30 for this. And even the newer one you can still pick up deals on. Kind of somewhere between a Highland and a Speyside style, which is kind of true to their location where they are in the Highlands. Quite malt driven and tasty. Great whiskey, 8 out of 10. Another Tomatin, this time in the new livery, the new chunkier bottle with the transparent label on the front and things. This is the Legacy, their non-age statement entry product. Now you can buy this in supermarkets for sometimes less than £25, which is astonishing value for this whiskey. The thing that strikes you about this is how well it's done. There's no age statement on it. They've not been confident enough to tell us exactly what age the whiskey is inside, but they have been skillful enough to bring us a young whiskey that is really quite engaging. Despite it only being at 43%, this is decent stuff, and yes, you can taste that it's youthful, but it's just got enough virgin oak cask going on in there to take a bit of rough edges off and give you a nice, rich experience. Of course it's young, but it's damn good despite that, and there's nothing wrong with young whiskey. Another 8 out of 10. Well done, Tomatin. Nikka Coffey Malt. This is a curious whiskey. This is malt whiskey that's been distilled in a column still. So they literally take malted barley and put it through a column still, so they treat it the same way that you would treat a grain. What comes out is a really, really rich experience, and considering how expensive Japanese whiskey is, this is about £45 to £50 a bottle, which is great value. It's not just rich, it is probably one of the most chocolatey whiskies I've ever tried, and this is one of the very few Japanese whiskies that I would recommend right now. 8.5 out of 10. Compass Box Spice Tree. Yeah, this is a controversial spice tree that a few years back Compass Box got into trouble for using a unique way of maturing their whiskey or marrying their whiskey in the cask with extra staves added. This is the newer version, so they used French toasted oak end caps or barrel ends instead. So this is perfectly acceptable to call this blended malt Scotch whiskey, according to the SWA, and we're very grateful for that because this is bloody good whiskey. Compass Box is creeping up in price, but this is still reasonably good value, and we're not really paying for the liquid that's in the bottle anymore. We're paying for the reputation, and we're paying for what Compass Box has built up over the last 20 years, so it is thoroughly deserved. It's very rare for you ever to open a Compass Box whiskey and be disappointed, and this is no exception. This is bloody good whiskey. It's 9 out of 10, and I would always love to have a bottle of this in the cabinet. Great stuff. Kininvie, 17 and 23-year-old. Now lots of folk haven't even heard of Kininvie, but it's the third component of the Grants complex up in Duffton. And it goes into things like a lot of the Grant's blends and stuff like that. But now that they've got the huge facility down in the lowlands at Girvan, they probably don't need Kininvie as much as they once did, and oftentimes it's silent. I think it's silent right now. And it's very rare that you see a single malt bottling, really rare. This 17-year-old and 23-year-old started off as a travel retail exclusive and then popped up here and there and other specialists and things like that. This was expensive stuff because this is a tiny, gorgeous and cute, but expensive little 35cl bottle. This one was £75, which scales up to £150. That's expensive. This one was much better value. This was just under £100, which scales up to close to £200 of course, but this is a 23-year-old. They were both really good whiskies, probably right in the centre of the flavour map, but really classy and well crafted. I was a wee bit disappointed by the presentation. 42.6% for both of them seems a bit odd, I don't know why. Especially at that price point, I would have expected them to go for something a bit more like the labelling suggests, a bit more artisan presentation. The 17-year-old started off to be my favourite, but over time with a little bit of air, the 23-year-old showed its class and came good. This was fantastic whiskey. I wouldn't really replace either of these again. There's so much more that you could buy for this kind of money, but it was a nice experience to have these for a while, and it's nice to say that you've tried Kininvie, which is close to a unicorn whiskey. Decent stuff. 7.5 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Glenfarclas 10-year-old. Really good, light, perfect example of a Speyside whiskey. To me, Glenfarclas tends to get better a wee bit with age. When I like Glenfarclas when it's got more of that heavy, sherry, much more rich experience, but this is still decent, clean whiskey at 10 years old, and I would always like to have this in the cabinet. For 10 years old, when you consider how good value the older Glenfarclas are, I mean 21-year-old at less than £90, 25-year-old at £120, things like that, this at close to £40 is quite expensive for a 10-year-old. But that doesn't mean you can level any criticism at its quality. It's still very decent. I do wish that they would present it a wee bit more ABV for that price. It's served at 40%, which means it can sometimes taste a wee bit thin depending on where you sip it in a flight. Regardless, it's still a decent dram. I would replace it and I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Linkwood. This is a 12-year-old Flora and Fauna Linkwood. Now, there's lots of Linkwood available as independents, but this is really the only official bottling you can get from Diageo. It's a light, nice, oily whiskey with a kind of more kind of sweet but slightly herbal, almost floral note. It's quite an interesting whiskey, and I think if I'm honest, it might be one of those whiskies that you could consider isn't entirely a beginner's whiskey. There's an interesting Ralphie video where he waters it down and waters it down and waters it down until a point that he feels it's shown its best. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that exactly. I tend to enjoy this neat at the 43% it's bottled at. I like this whiskey, I like it a lot. I like to spend my time with it, and I've already replaced this, and I would certainly always have one in the cupboard. But it's not to everyone's taste, I would have to say. Some people describe this 12-year-old bottling as a bit nondescript and bland. I think it just needs a wee bit more time, to be honest. 7.5 out of 10. People are going to get tired of me talking about this whiskey. Deanston used to be a bit naff, it really did, but I'm going back quite a few years now, maybe 6, 7, 8 or more years. But the recent stuff coming out of Deanston is spectacular, to the point that I named Deanston my distillery of the year last year. And one of the best examples of that is actually this 12-year-old. I can pick this up for less than £35 and it's spectacular. And I got through it very, very quickly because I just wanted to share it with everybody that would listen to me about how good it was. And for the most part, everybody agrees. This is a decent distillery doing great things. 46.3%, 12-year-old age statement on the bottle, and it says quite clearly here, unchill filtered. Perfect stuff. I would give this 9 out of 10. That's how good this is for a 12-year-old whiskey. Fabulous. And now almost the other end of the spectrum, sadly. This is a fantastic distillery that does really, really good whiskey. However, this standard 16-year-old bottle that I picked up at an airport, it was a travel retail at that time, this is bottled at 40%, and this 16-year-old cost me the guts of £100. It lasted a bit too long in my cabinet just because I was so completely ambivalent about it. There wasn't anything engaging, and I always felt that this was the perfect example of a whisky that's been destroyed and taken away from whisky aficionados because of the ABV, because of the bottling strength. Now, most people will rock up and enjoy this and think that it's powerful and strong enough at 40%, but for people who really love their whisky, people that's going to go out and spend £100 on a Royal Brackla, they're not going to get much out of this, I'm afraid. I can only score this 7 out of 10, say I won't replace it, and it kind of makes me quite sad. Just too bland and soft. Okay, this is Jura Prophecy, which is a peated Jura whisky. I've tried some peated and unpeated independent bottlings of Jura, which have mostly been really quite good, really engaging, and yet pretty much every single official bottling I pick up from Jura or try is just undescribably dull or oversweet and sickly, or there's just odd things going on there, and I don't understand why. I don't understand how they can take decent whisky and make it bland. Regardless, this Prophecy wasn't too bad. This particular one's a non-age statement, but it was served at 46% and it had just enough peat in it to keep it quite balanced and interesting, and it was a decent, enjoyable whisky. But I wouldn't replace this again. There's just not enough in here. And I just wonder what's going on at Jura. I'm sure one day I'm going to find a bottle of Jura that I really love and engage with, but it hasn't happened yet. I'll keep my fingers crossed. Meanwhile, this one gets 7 out of 10. AnCnoc, 12 years old. This is a pretty decent 12-year-old whisky, pretty decent Highlander. What always strikes me about AnCnoc 12 is it's very kind of eucalyptus. There's a strong flavour of cloves to the point that I almost pick it up in all the AnCnocs that I'm trying just now. It's a nice note, I quite like it, don't get me wrong, but I don't always believe that this is a beginner's whisky. I think people that are just getting into whisky would look at this and wonder what's going on sometimes. It's, you know, it's not too extreme, it's not overly sweet, it's not smoky, it's not rich and sherried, it's just kind of it just kind of carves its own furrow, this whisky, and I think it should be celebrated for that. I think this is a very good 12-year-old whisky, but know what you're getting into. I don't think it's going to blow you away in any particular direction. If you are enjoying whiskies and you've been getting into whiskies for some time, when you pour this, pour it in contrast to something else and hopefully you can pick up what I'm talking about. I would definitely have this in a cabinet again. You can always get it at a decent price as well, £35 and under usually. And the older AnCnocs can be quite interesting as well, and certainly good value. This is a 7.5 out of 10. Give it a go. Last, but certainly not least, Lagavulin 12-year-old. This is the special releases. This is a 2017 special release from Diageo, released towards the end of last year. Quite a lot of chatter about this one over the course of last year and over Christmas time, and deservedly so. It's really, really good whisky, to the point that I would actually say that this is one of the best Lagavulins I've sipped out of glass in a long, long time. This was very rich. Think of custard and vanilla biscuits, and think of sweet lemony spice and smoke and pepper, and just one of the most engaging whiskies. And in terms of ownership, this is probably the best whisky I experienced last year, and I actually named it my whisky of the year last year. I've got another bottle in there already, and I'm already looking at replacing that because I just don't want that one that's in there to end either. I'm really enjoying sharing it with people, and everybody that tries it says the same thing, that it's a damn fine Lagavulin. This is a peach. It's not going to be around forever. Go out and get it. 9 out of 10. 9.5 maybe. Somewhere between 9 and 9.5 out of 10. That's all for this time. Till the next time. Holy shit.